What's going on, guys, and welcome to another driver tier list video. Today we're going to be doing a tier list for the 2023 Austrian Grand Prix. Of course, it's our second sprint weekend of the year, of the season, and just like I did with Baku last time, this is mostly going to be ratings based on the Grand Prix. There will be factors about the sprint and stuff, but it's mainly the Grand Prix and Grand Prix qualifying, although it is mainly the actual race. I do take qualifying into account, and I am going to somewhat take the sprint into account, but really it's ratings for the Grand Prix itself. So that's the race on Sunday. So yeah, let's just get straight into it with Alexander Albon. He finished in P11, just outside the points. He was in the points for a bit. I think he was a little bit annoyed with maybe that they didn't quite do the right thing on strategy, because he was pretty sure they would. He thought they could pick up a point or two. I am going to give Albon a B. I didn't really see a whole lot of him, and there's not really much else to say. If he got into the points, probably would have been an A, and whether it was the team or whether it was him, it sounds like it was more the team, but yeah, I think a B is a reasonable grade. He did a good job to be P11, but it's not quite points, so I'm not quite going to give him any higher than that. Yeah, because the Williams did look like a good car here, so for him to not get into the points, I can't give him more than that, personally. I'm not sure where they all qualified, by the way. I think, did he get into Q3? I think he did get into Q3, didn't he? He did for one of them anyway, the sprint or the main race, or maybe both, I don't know, but yeah, anyway. Fernando Alonso finished P5 in the end. The Aston didn't look that great here in Austria, to be honest, and came through for a good result for P5. Definitely not one of Fernando's better weekends. He got out-qualified by Stroll in main qualifying. I think he beat him in sprint quali, but in main quali, he got beaten by him. So I think just because of that, and I mean, it's only a P5, he got beaten by a McLaren. The McLaren, well, at least in Norris's hands with the new upgrades, looked pretty good this weekend, actually. But I think I've just got to give Alonso a B this time around. It was good. It was fine enough. He did beat Stroll in the end, but yeah, it wasn't one of his better weekends. But I mean, that's with how he's been performing lately. It's not saying that he's done a bad job. It's just he's been doing such a good job that, a bit more of a quiet weekend for Alonso puts him further down. We've then got Valtteri Bottas, who finished P15. Yeah, a bit of another one to forget here for Bottas. It wasn't a terrible weekend for him, to be fair. I think was it the sprint or the other race where he actually did decent in like quali and stuff. Yeah, it's not a terrible weekend from Bottas. I think it's just going to have to be a C. It's just he was there, I suppose. Was it in the sprint or the main race where he got a bit of damage at the start? I think that might have been the main race. So that could have been a reason as well for him not being quite up there. But the Alfa Romeo also not particularly good here by the looks of it. So yeah, I think a C from Bottas. Not really much else to say. Nick de Vries, a lot of pressure on his shoulders this weekend, with Helmut Marko going on about how maybe Christian Horner was right about not wanting de Vries and basically saying that de Vries is crap, all in all. And yeah, I mean, he beat Tsunoda in both qualifying, actually, didn't he? I'm pretty sure he did in the main race, at least, for main quali. And then did beat him in the race in the end, P17. Tsunoda had a very bad weekend, though. And yeah, de Vries, ultimately, his racing, I don't think, was great. He, pushed Magnussen off. And I think that was completely his fault. He just completely didn't care for him. Just was like, yeah, you get into the gravel. It's not one of his absolute terrible weekends, but I still think it's a poor weekend from de Vries. He's not improving, to be honest, not like he should be. I think it's a D for de Vries. Yeah, just going to stick him right there. Pierre Gasly finished P10, started P9 for the main race. Did not have a great sprint, but had a decent race. Did actually finish P9, but then all the penalties. He was one that also got penalties. Ended up finishing in P10. But yeah, I think it was decent by him. He was a bit behind. 10 seconds ahead of Albon. Yeah. Is it a B for Gasly or is it just a C? I don't know really, because I think to weigh it out, because he didn't have a great sprint, I think C. Is that reasonable? Yeah, I think C. I think a C for Gasly is about right. Yeah, bottom of the points. It's kind of where they expect to be. Only retirement in this race being Hulkenberg, a car that probably wasn't going to finish ahead of them anyway. So, yeah, he's about where he should be, maybe a little bit low. So I think a C is reasonable. Hamilton finished P8. Did not have a good weekend at all. Was disliking the car all weekend, and really just wasn't. Well, I say he wasn't on the pace. He actually had a little bit more pace than Russell this weekend, but I think the car just wasn't there. And yeah, he got all the penalties and stuff. He was whining a little bit. I think it's a C for Hamilton. Honestly, I don't think the car was that good this weekend, but he was track extending where Russell wasn't. I don't think Russell got any penalties for track extending, whereas Hamilton did. And yeah, finished behind him in the end, even though he qualified well ahead of him. Yeah, so I think it's just got to be a C for Hamilton. Nico Hulkenberg, like I said, did not finish the race, had an issue like 17 laps in or something, didn't finish. Had great both qualifying, actually. Main race qualifying, I think he qualified P8 or something. It was in the top 10, and then in sprint qualifying, he was P4 and was running in P2 at one point in the sprint. Came back to finish P6. And yeah, to be honest, it was an issue in the race that he couldn't really do anything about. I don't think I can give him more than a B, but I think a B is reasonable because, it was a good sprint, finishing P6. And yeah, he got into Q3 both weekends, so I think a B is a good result for him. Charles Leclerc, finished P2 in the end. Finally, another good result for Leclerc on the podium again. Had a terrible sprint. Don't know where he was in those kind of dry, wet conditions, mixed conditions, but in the main quali and in the race when it was completely dry, he definitely had the pace. I'd say Carlos was possibly a little bit quicker than him all weekend, but was making a few more mistakes with the track limits. Leclerc didn't seem to have those issues with track limits. And yeah, ultimately brought it home ahead of Perez. A few more laps, and Perez Perez kind of got past Norris, didn't he? And didn't really, Norris and Sainz, and then didn't really look like he was making any inroads on Leclerc. So yeah, I think I'm going to give, it's not an S. I can't give him an S purely. I think he got the best out of the car in quali and in the main race. But the sprint, like I said, the sprint does slightly come into play here. So I think because of that, I've got to put him in A because the sprint was terrible. And ultimately, I think Carlos did have the pace over him this weekend. Leclerc just was maybe a little bit smarter in the way he drove, not getting the penalties and stuff. So, yeah, I think an A for Leclerc. Finally, another good weekend for him after a few fairly poor ones. Kevin Magnussen finished in P18, had that issue with De Vries where he got pushed off. Ultimately didn't have the pace of Hulkenberg this weekend. I think I've just got to give him a C. It wasn't terrible, but yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, I think if Hulkenberg finished the race, especially if he was in the points, he would have been in the A's. He's gone in the B's because, he only did 17 laps in the race, but everything else was good. Whereas Magnussen was just kind of meh all weekend. For me, Lando Norris had a great weekend. It ended up finishing P4 in the end thanks to Carlos Sainz's penalty. Would have been P5. Had great pace. Didn't have issues with track limits, I don't think at all. Actually, I heard something about Zhou was the only one who didn't even have a warning for track limits. So everybody else must have at least had a warning. But, I never heard of a black and white flag or anything like that for Norris, Leclerc, Verstappen, And it's a brilliant weekend for Norris. That McLaren looks bloody good with the new upgrades, at least in his hands. We know he's a specialist at Austria, but it's got to be an S for Norris. I think driver of the day quite easily. Brilliant drive. Yeah, not much more to say about that. Great drive from Lando this week. Esteban Ocon had a bit of a one to forget. Did decent in the sprint. I think he finished like P7. Did better than Gasly, but still not amazing. Well, probably about as much as he could do. But then, yeah, in the main race quali, I think he got knocked out in Q2, and then yeah, he had 30 seconds of penalties at the end of the race, which is ridiculous. I still think, do I give him is a D too harsh? I think, no, you know what? Has the team told him about track extending there? That's the thing. I think I am going to give him a D because Gasly definitely had the measure on him this weekend. So, at least for the main race. So, yeah, that might be a little bit harsh. putting him the same as De Vries is a bit, maybe a little bit harsh, but I just don't feel like I should put him level with Gasly, and I don't feel like Gasly's a B, so it does seem harsh. But 30 seconds of penalties, I'm putting him a D. Whether the team told him or not, he's got 30 seconds of penalties at the end of the race. It's a D. I'm sorry. It just has to be. Sergio Perez, terrible qualifying. P15, I think it was. Absolutely awful. Or was it Russell that was P15? I can't remember. He didn't have a good quali. No, I think it was P15 because he didn't even get a lap in, did he? I don't know. Because was it Russell in the main race didn't get through quali because he had an issue? Or didn't get to do a lap in Q2 because he had an issue? I can't remember. But yeah, he fought back through to P3, so it's a very good recovery drive from Perez. But I can't give him more than a B because he bottled it in qualifying. Yes, he can make it up in the race, but he's in the quickest car by far on the grid. And although it was a great recovery drive, Austria is a fairly decent track to overtake on, and he's in the quickest car on the grid. So I think a B. He needs to step it up in quali for me. Being that low down in quali and having track extending 3 times in a row to not put a lap in is ridiculous. It's just not acceptable, to be honest. At least he had some pace, though, in the race. And he had a decent sprint as well, challenged Max into turn 1. That was exciting, but yeah, race or quali was one to forget, which kind of set everything up for the race. Oscar Piastri got very unlucky, finished P16 in the end. Yeah, I think he got damage at the start, and looking at the replay, it wasn't really his fault, the damage. And then, yeah, just didn't have the pace from there. So I think, is a C too generous? When I'm giving Ocon a... Yeah, but he got all the penalties. Piastri didn't get a penalty, did he? So yeah, C. Screw it. I feel like I may be screwing Ocon over here a bit, but he got 30 seconds of penalties, for God's sake. Honestly, I don't think it was Piastri's pace that was the problem. He got damage at the start and then was kind of nowhere after that point. So yeah, I think a C is reasonable. George Russell didn't have great quality, like I said, but that was mainly because, well, 1, the car wasn't great, and 2, he had an issue. But then he fought through in the race for a pretty good result. I think I've still got to give him a C, though, because he finished ahead of Hamilton because... maybe a B. B? I don't know. It's so difficult because he beat Hamilton, but Hamilton got that penalty. But he did start a ways behind Hamilton, so... And it wasn't really his fault that he went out in Q2, so... Yeah. I'm going to give him a B. Screw it. I'm giving him a B. It's really difficult this time for some reason. I'm having real issues ranking all these drivers. Carlos Sainz is going to be another difficult one because his pace was amazing this weekend. He, I reckon, had the pace over Leclerc. Yes, Leclerc beat him in quali, but he beat Leclerc by a mile in sprint quali, beat him in the sprint by a mile, and then was looking good in the main race until the penalties, which ultimately were his fault. So because of that, I've got to give him a B. I think it would have been an A if not for all the penalties. But yeah, sorry, Carlos. It's looking promising for him, though. After the start of the season where he wasn't looking comfortable, he's looking a lot more comfortable now. So that's good. Logan Sargent, apart from the penalties that he got at the end of the race, good race from Sargent, I think. I think one of his better races, probably second best race after Bahrain, I think. Even with I think he got 10-second penalty at the end. Even with that penalty, still finished P13. Only just, well, I think he was a decent way behind his teammate, but only 2 positions behind Albon. I think that's a reasonable result for Sargent. So I'm going to give him a B. That might be a bit too much, but hey, P13, the Williams look good here. 2 positions behind your teammate. The penalties screwed it over a little bit, but I think it's one of his better weekends. So yeah, I think a B, maybe a bit generous. Lance Stroll finished P9, qualified ahead of Alonso. Great qualifying, not great in the race. He wasn't amazing. I still think it's a B though. Yeah, a lot of drivers in the Bs here. Very, very big category this time around. Everybody was, either a standout or kind of just somewhere in the middle, just kind of average. Same goes for Stroll. Yuki Tsunoda, pretty terrible weekend for him. I can't remember what he did in the sprint, but I didn't score points, but I mean, you don't really expect that, to be fair, from the AlphaTauri, when they have to finish in the top 8. But the race, he got damage at the start and then was trying to make moves with a damaged front wing, outbraked himself into turn 4, and just went completely all off. It was bad. It's not an F because it's like his first quite bad result this year, I think. So I think it's an E. Because he got beaten by De Vries in one of the qualies as well, so not the best from Yuki this time around after he was showing such good form for the first few races. Max Verstappen, it's an S. Do we even have to talk about it anymore? Dominated. He at least hasn't led every single lap since whatever lap it was in Miami now, but I mean, what else could he do apart from maybe get a better start and defend from Perez and Leclerc? But I mean, such a big straight and everything, the slipstream's crazy, so not really much else he could do. And then Zhou Guanyu finished in P12, so he did finish ahead of Bottas actually, but yeah, ultimately not great. I think he had an issue in quali, was it, or in practice that issued, I can't remember. To see, there's not really much else to say. And yeah, that is that. As you can see, many drivers in the B and C tier here, very much just kind of middle of the road for most people, but definitely for me, the standout Landau Norris driver of the day, amazing result. And yeah, Yuki Tsunoda, I think just because of the start of the race and the contact and the, locking up or just braking too late, I think, that has to put him at the bottom position. Maybe I'm a little bit harsh on Ocon, and maybe I'm being a little bit nice on Piastri and perhaps Magnussen, but yeah, I don't know. It's a difficult one to think about, when you've got the main race, you've got the sprint, you've got 2 quali sessions. It's quite difficult, but that is my driver tier list for the 2023 Austrian Grand Prix. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, please go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.